Shalom Aleichem. Today is Yom Hamishi B'Shabbat, Thursday, the 31st of July 2025. The Minyonam, Wow, Be'av Taushin Pehe. We are in Hilchot Teshuvah. Rabbeinu Agadol, Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimun, HaSefaradi. Perek Shmini of Hilchot Teshuvah. So we began, we saw the beginning of the Perek, of the chapter. We were speaking here about Olam Haba. The topic of this Perek in general is Olam Haba. And we discussed the concept of Kareth and the important statement that the Ikar, the essential point that Rambam made was Hikareth ba'olam hazeh, Tikareth l'haya olam haba. This is the end of Halakha Bet, as you can see at the top here. Kolomar she'otha hanefesh sheparasha min haguf ba'olam hazeh. That is how Rambam explains Hikareth ba'olam hazeh. In other words, at the point of a person leaving this world, eina zocha l'haya olam haba. So the kareth be'olam hazeh, according to Rambam, is simply death, simply the end of physical existence on this earth. And that is not the standard understanding. It's also not the simple mashma'ut of various statements of the Chachamim, from which it seems that Kareth Ba'olam Hazeh also refers to shortening of life in this world. That's Kareth Ba'olam Hazeh. That the age of 60 is mentioned by Chachamim in the Talmud as a mark, sign that a person may have died because of Kareth Ba'olam Hazeh. In other words, if a person passed his 60th birthday, then he's not Hayav Kareth. And the Olam Haba, of course, is Olam Haba, of course, refers to the question of whether a person yesh lo halak Olam Haba. And we know that Kol Yisrael yesh lo halak Olam Haba, except for certain exceptional categories. Okay, let us begin. Continue, that is to say, in Halacha Gimel or Beth, Rambam states, Olam Haba, en bo guf u'chviyah. Olam Haba, now Rambam begins to describe in very general and somewhat vague terms, because we cannot do more than that, as he will explain, the nature of Olam Haba, literally the world to come. Rambam says, En bo guf u'chviyah, there is no physical existence, so there is no physical body in Olam Haba, ela nafshot hasadiqim bilvad belo guf. What exists in that world, or in that reality, it's a different reality, different dimensions, if you wish, is the nefesh hasadiq, nafshot hasadiqim, not attached to any body, kemalachei asharet, similar to angels, in other words, a purely spiritual existence. This too is quite different from the understanding of the simple understanding of what Chachamim say on the matter, and how it is understood by various Rishonim, such as the Rambam in Sefer Torah Ha'adam and many others. But we're looking now at Rambam's understanding of the matter. And seeing that this is a non-corporeal existence, no body, no physical body, therefore, there is no need and also therefore no possibility of achila, of eating and drinking, v'lo shetiyah, ולא דבר מכל הדברים שגופות בני האדם צריכים להם בעולם הזה. Nor is there any need for any of those things that human beings require in this world in terms of material needs. ולא יארע בו דבר מכל הדברים שמרעים לגופות בעולם הזה. There is none of the normal realities of physical existence. Therefore, none of the usual aspects of human existence in this world apply in Olam Haba. ולא יארע בו דבר מכל הדברים שמארעים לגופות בעולם הזה, כגון, such as ישיבה ועמידה ושינה ומיתה, sitting or standing or sleeping or dying, מעצב, sadness, וצחוק, happiness or frivolity, וכיוצא בהם. All these things are not, by definition, are not relevant and do not have any place in this reality of Olam Haba. And now Rambam quotes the statement of the Chachamim, Kach amaru Chachamim harishonim. Olam Haba en bo lo achila v'lo shetiyah v'lo tashmish, no sexual relations, obviously also, ela tzadikim yoshavim v'atrothehem berashehem. Tzadikim, the words literally mean that the righteous, and as we said before, Rambam said earlier that B'olam Haba, at the beginning of this halakha, Rambam said that in Olam Haba you only have nafshoth ha-tzadikim. So we're talking here about the nefesh of the tzaddik. Yoshavim v'atrothehem berashehem, and literally they're wearing their crowns. V'nehenim miziva shechina. And they literally are in a state where they can experience and be sustained by this otherworldly reality of basking, as it were, in the light of Hashem, or a certain shefa, certain emanation that the nefesh of the tzaddik is able to perceive and to enjoy in that reality. And Rambam goes on to explain what he believes this refers to. So now halakha daled. Rambam says, Hare nitbareh lecha she'en sham guf lefi she'en sham achila u'shtiyah. In other words, if the Chachamim told you that there is no eating and drinking, from that you understand that there is also no guf, there is no corporeal body. In other words, the Rambam would not accept the other explanation or view of these things, which is that there can be a physical existence, albeit of a very different sort, a different dimension, but there can be, and in fact is, B'olam Haba, a physical being. A human being is still a physical being, but the physicality is not sustained in the normal fashion as we see here on this earth. That is to say, this physical being does not require food or drink or sexual relations or anything of that sort. Rambam simply says if there's no eating and drinking, there's no body, because these things go together. But others would say no. It is an existence of a sort, on a level, of a type that is so thoroughly distinct and different from what we experience here at Ba'olam Hazeh, that such things as eating and drinking are not required and not relevant. But that does not necessarily negate the possibility of the idea of a physical existence. And that which it says that the tzaddikim sit literally with their crowns on their heads, this, Rambam says, al derech ahida. This is said as a kind of mashal. Kolomar, nafshot hatzaddikim nisloyim sham. In other words, the souls of the righteous. First and foremost, of Am Yisrael, Kol Yisrael Yeshlem Halakul Am Haba. They exist in a stable state. This is how Rambam explains that Yeshiva refers to as stable reality, an unchanging, constant reality. Nafshot haSadiqim l'suyim sham b'lo amal v'lo yaga, without the need for any effort or any action on their part. It is a passive existence, a very wonderful, very sublime existence, but it is a passive existence. A person does not need to do anything. And that which it says about their crowns on their heads, is talking about their intellectual, spiritual attainments. That understanding, that level of wisdom, of understanding, etc., defines their soul, who they are. And that is their crown. So this is a mashal. As it says in Shir HaShirim, there it also speaks about the crown of Shlomo HaMelech, not referring to his physical monarchical crown. And also speaking of Olam Haba, so it is the pasuk is understood, certainly by Rambam here. It's referring to Olam Haba. وَإِنَّ السِّمْحَةَ guf كَدَيْ شَتَنُوحَ al-harosh. Simcha, of course, is an abstract concept, and does not reside in the head or on the head or anything like that. So all of these things must be understood as allegories. Kach abtara amru hachamim kan hi. This refers to their level. This is not to be understood precisely in the manner that the ancient Greek philosophers understood the concept of the nefesh, or the de'ah. In other words, there's no question that Rambam here is being influenced by what he saw in the Greek philosophical texts. This approach is without a doubt a reflection of the ideas and the opinions that he saw there, which is exactly why it is suspect, as many Chachamim have pointed out, whether it's the Ramban or Rabbeinu Yonah or many others. Nevertheless, Rambam is not claiming, as also you find this opinion expressed in at the beginning of Sefer HaKuzari, the Rabbeinu Yehuda HaLevi, where he mentions the opinions and the understandings and the beliefs of the Greek philosophers. There, the Da'ah that they refer to is an intellectual, philosophical, and even scientific understanding. In other words, the more a person investigated the workings of nature and the physical world and understood how things are and how things work, and therefore could be described as an extremely wise man and knowledgeable, this understanding is the basis for the what happens to the soul later. Rambam says otherwise. In other words, in Rambam's understanding, is not only an objective, scientific, philosophical understanding of the world, but it is also a matter of being aware of Hashem, the Boreh, the Creator, and understanding how Hashem runs the world, as it were, and maintains it. This by definition is very different from the classic philosophical position of the Greeks, because they, for various, again, philosophical reasons or musings or assumptions, concluded that the Creator is so great, so majestic, and therefore so far removed from the physical world in which we reside, that clearly he has no interest and no knowledge of what goes on in this world. Knowledge in the specific sense. He's not involved in what goes on. There's no hashgacha, right? For example, hashgachat Hashem is not a possibility or an issue according to that perception, and goes without saying that the Creator would not spend his time communicating with human beings, and there is no nevuah. There cannot be any kind of prophecy or communion or communication with Hashem, because he is so far removed from any such reality. And that is, of course, the definition of an epikorus. An epikorus is someone who denies the possibility of nevuah, for that very reason that we mentioned. Whereas the Rambam, of course, believing in nevuah, believing in hashgahat Hashem, believing that Hashem is intimately involved in this world, which is a completely different understanding of reality, of human existence, thoroughly different. Even though Rambam was influenced by these Greek ideas, but only up to an extent, only up to a certain point. So according to Rambam, the wisdom and the understanding, the knowledge of the person, of the righteous person, is not just what we would call objective scientific knowledge regarding the physical world or something like that, but it also involves a clear spiritual dimension. Rambam continues, and he says in Halacha Hey, Umahu za sha'abaru wa nahanim mizi wa shechina. So according to our understanding, says Rambam, that we must understand, and we do understand, that statement of the Chachamim in Masechet Berachot, that Tzadikim Yoshavim U'atarothehem Berashehem U'nehenim Mizi Wa Shechina. What does that mean, that enjoy, or they bask in the light of Hashem. שיודעים ומסירים מאמיתת הקודש ברוך הוא, מה שאינם יודעים, והם בגוף האפל השפל. In other words, basking in the light of Hashem refers also a kind of allegory, a mashal, referring to the ability of a human being in that state of olam haba to perceive something of the essence or the existence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that which is not possible to understand as long as a person is attached and tied down, as it were, by physical existence in this world. In other words, physical existence in this world is an impediment to achieving this level of understanding and of communion with Hashem. B'olam haba, this becomes possible. But in order to achieve this b'olam haba, one has to achieve a very high level b'olam haba, b'olam hazeh first, and then b'olam haba, it is as it were, your chips are cashed in, and you achieve a level and a type of existence and understanding that is not possible in this world. It's interesting to note that this last statement of Rambam here is in some way reminiscent of certain streams or schools of thought in the Hasidic world, specifically actually Lubavitch Chabad, strange as that may seem. But there is a connection. There is a certain point where they converge here. In other words, in those schools of thought, which in every way are very different from Rambam's essential assumptions and understandings, nevertheless, they do speak a great deal about understanding the nature of Hashem, which is itself strange because Chazal state clearly that that's not possible. But it is a fact that these particular schools of thought spend much time and energy in discussing, as they believe, the nature of Hashem at the present time, the nature of Hashem before the Bria, before the creation, which most Mekubalim, for example, which is where these schools of Hasidic thought have their roots, do not discuss at all, refuse to discuss and explain and claim explicitly that it is asur to even contemplate such things, and that anyhow it's not possible to achieve any meaningful and significant understanding. Rambam here says that the difference, of course, being that it's not. Nevertheless, there is a big difference because Rambam is speaking about achieving such an understanding, or some limited understanding, which is not possible in this world, b'olam haba, whereas these Hasidic groups claim that they can discuss and meaningfully discuss these matters b'olam hazeh. That's a very big difference. So there's on the one hand a certain similarity, on the other hand a very huge gulf exists between them. And therefore Rambam continues now in Halacha Wal or Gimel, and he says, Kol nefesh ha'amura b'inyan zeh. We use the word nefesh in this context, says Rambam, eina ha'neshama shehi tzaricha laguf. We are not referring to what the Rambam refers to as the neshama. In other words, the life force, what we would call the life force of a human being or any living creature. That when that life force exists within it, it is alive, and when it ceases to, it disappears or is completely weakened and nullified, then by definition, that being, that living creature, ceases to live, ceases to exist. So the neshama is what vitalizes and what enlivens the physical human being. In Rambam, this is Rambam's terminology, very different from the way these terms are used usually nowadays and by other opinions and schools of thought. The neshama refers to the basic life force that in some circles might be referred to as the nefesh ha-behemi. In other words, the animal soul. In other words, the life force. So nefesh here, Rambam says, no, when I say nefesh, I mean surat ha-nefesh. In other words, the higher aspects of human understanding and experience, which do not exist in the lower animals. In other words, something which is unique to human beings. That's Thurat HaNefesh. Shehi HaDe'ah Shehi Sira HaBoreh Shehi Sira HaBoreh Kefi Koha. In other words, that part of the human being which is able to somehow connect with Hashem. Vehi Sira HaDe'oth HaNifradoth U'Sha'ar HaMa'asim. In other words, a person who has achieved a certain spiritual awareness and familiarity with the spiritual realm, which includes De'oth HaNifradot, which refers to angels. That Rambam refers to elsewhere as Sechalim Nivdalim, in other words, purely spiritual beings. وهي الثرى شبيانو عِنْيَنَا بفرق ربيعي من خلق يسود التوراة. There Rambam discusses these things as we learned in the past. He hanikret nefesh be'inyan zeh. This is what we refer to here when we use the term nefesh.
Rabbi,
yes.
How would the Rambam explain the experiences of individuals like Moshe or Eliyahu that had very spiritual experiences, almost Olam Haba-like experiences in terms of their closeness to Hashem, while still retaining some sort of physical form, although not needing to eat or drink or anything like that?
Yes, it's a valid question. Rambam's understanding is that these realities, these events were exceptional in every way, but there was within, as you say, within the framework within the parameters of Olam Hazeh, of this world. In other words, it's an unusual, exceptional state of affairs in this world, which is described in very specific and very rare, in rare persons, on very rare, unique occasions. But Olam Haba, by definition, is a different dimension altogether. So, Olam Hazeh, there is a body, and normally it requires sustenance of a physical sort. It lives and exists in the physical domain and dimension, and therefore requires physical sustenance. As a kind of nes, as a kind of supernatural occurrence, this was the Moshe Rabbeinu and Eliyahu Hanavi received a kind of waiver, as it were, a kind of visa waiver, if you like. In other words, you can enter a kind of realm that others cannot enter, but don't even, and that too is only temporary. Whereas Rambam goes on to explain now in Halacha Zayin, or still Halacha Gimel, when we refer to Olam Haba as Rambam understands it, Rambam says, Hayim Elu, this existence, this type of existence, this dimension of existence, Olam Haba, the Fishin Imahem Maweth, where death no longer holds sway, Shein HaMaweth Ela Mim'oroth Haguf. Death is itself one aspect of physical existence. That a finite being and a physical corporeal being is finite and has an end, and that belongs B'olam Hazeh only, not B'olam Haba. And in the Olam Haba, Rambam says, En Sham Guf, and therefore this type of existence, this dimension of existence, is referred to as Tharora Hayim. The word Tharor is referring usually to certain things that are placed together and kept and maintained in a certain state, such as in a purse, where several coins are placed and then it's tied together. Lithror is to tie, and thus the contents of that purse are kept and preserved and maintained. So Tharora Hayim is as it were, as if a person's nefesh was placed in a special place where it is maintained and kept and preserved and protected. And that's what the pasuk Rambam says means when Abigail says to David HaMelech, "V'hayatha nefesh Adoni tharura b'tharora hayim." وَزَوَ السَّخَارِ شَأَنْ سَخَارِ لَمَعْلَى مِمَنُ. There is no higher, there cannot be a higher level of reward and existence and experience than this Olam Haba experience. وَالطَّوَى شَأَنْ حَرَى الطَّوَى. There is nothing beyond that, there cannot be. وَهِي شَهِتَبُولَ كَوْلَ هَنَّبِيِّ. And this is what precisely the type of existence that all the Nevi'im hoped for and aspired to. Halacha, the continuation of Halacha Zayin or Daled in other editions, V'chama Shemoth Karu'ula Derech Mashal. And in various Pesukim, as Rambam discusses, Moran Abuchim and a few other places, the many Pesukim use allegorical images to describe this reality, this dimension of existence, Ba'olam Haba. V'chema shemoth koru'ula derech mashal. For example, Har Hashem, Mekom Kodesho, Derech HaKodesh, V'hasrot Hashem, V'ohel Hashem, V'no'am Hashem, V'hechal Hashem, V'vet Hashem, V'sha'ar Hashem. Which all, of course, refer to some form of existence in which a person is close to and in communion with Hashem, and has a much greater, much more powerful and overwhelming experience of Hashem. והחכמים קראו לה דרך משל לטובה זו המזומנת לצדיקים סעודה. And the Chachamim referred to this reality as a seudah, as it were, the tzaddikim are invited to a great banquet. וקוראים לה בכל מקום העולם הבא. And in general it's referred to as עולם הבא. And it follows, therefore, Rambam now says in Halacha Heth or He, HaNeqama she'en neqama gedola mimena, the greatest form of punishment that can be conceived of is shetikaret hanefesh v'lo tizkar le'otam ha'yim, that a person's soul will be blocked and cut off from such a form of existence. Shenemar hikareth tikaret hanefesh hahi avona ba v'zeh ha'ovdan hu shekorim otho hanviim derech mashal be'er shahad. The opposite, the lack of such an experience, is also referred to using different terms in the various pasukim, all by way of mashal, of allegory. In other words, a pit of destruction, and a complete end of existence. It is referred to by all these various terms. The term tofteh is used by the Chachamim to refer to Ge Ben Hinnom, a place of terrible, horrific place of avodah zarah, of child sacrifice and the like. Aluka, of course, is literally a leech that attaches itself to a person and sucks. Literally, it sustains itself by attaching itself to a living creature and being nourished by its blood supply. And there is no way of exiting this total non-existence and destruction. There is no after this. If a person is hayav kareth, there is no redemption on the individual level. I've said so this is irreversible. So now, yes.
With this framework, there's no relationship between Olam Haba and Tchiyat HaMetim.
That is correct, and this is one of the big major questions and difficulties in Rambam's approach to these things. There is no clear understanding or connection or context in which you can really place these things together, as opposed to those who explain that Tchiyat HaMetim is the beginning of this reality called Olam Haba. Of course, Olam Haba also, the very words imply that it, or certainly you can understand the term in that way, that it does not exist at the present time. It's a future dimension of reality, a created reality, like every reality is a created reality, but it's one that does not exist at the present point in time. And Tchiyat HaMetim is the first step in the point where the tzaddikim are revived with a physical existence and on a different level and dimension of existence, which is referred to as Olam Haba. Rambam will address this. Excuse me. Rambam will address this point presently. Rambam goes on to say, Shema tekal be'inecha tova zo. Now some people may say to themselves, well, okay, you're talking about some type of existence that I do not understand at any rate. I cannot understand. You yourself are telling me I cannot understand it or appreciate it. And if I'm not going to be zocheh, I'm not going to merit this kind of existence, ba'olam haba, so be it. It's not the end of the world, so to speak, and I can live with that. A person may think such a thing. Shema tekal b'einecha tova zo, ותדמה שאין שכר המצוות, והוויית האדם שלם בדרכי האמת. And you may imagine that the best possible level and form of existence that a person can hope for is lihiyotho ochel v'shoteh ma'achalot tovot, a reality in which there is physicality, and the person enjoys eating and drinking the finest foods, uva'el thuroth na'oth, and enjoys sexual relations with beautiful women, ulovesh b'chlei shesh v'rikma, and will be able to dress himself in the finest of clothing, v'shochen v'aleh shen, and reside in the most beautiful, luxurious of homes. Literally, shen is, of course, ivory, shen hav. Omishtamesh bichlei chesed v'zahav, and his utensils and his home is full of gold and silver articles and fixtures, udvarim hadomim la'elu, and such things. This is how some people might imagine a world in which a human being is rewarded and granted something very great and wonderful. כמו שמדמים אלו הערביים הטיפשים, as the Ishmaelim, the Arvim, the Arabs, Tipshim, foolish, empty-headed, Ewilim, which also implies not just lacking in understanding, but also inclined to do evil. In fact, if you look at the word Ewil and you think about the English word evil, you will see that there is a clear connection. Hashatofim bezima. Zima, of course, is zanuth. In other words, promiscuous sexual existence and activity. Now, Rambam lived amongst these people. He knew them rather well. So I think you can take Rambam's word for it. That this is the reality. And I do not believe that the Ishmaelim of today are any different. Avala hachamim, however, those who are not on that level, uva'alei de'ah, those who have achieved a much more sublime form of understanding and existence in this world, yeda'u, they know shekol ha'devarim ha'elu divrei havai v'hevelhem, such things are empty and frivolous, وَإِنْ بَهِمْ تَحَلَث, and there is no real gain in such things. وَإِنَا الطَّوَّا گَدُولَا أَثْلَانُ بَعْلَمْ هَذَا, and none of these things are considered a real tova in the true sense, no great benefit or achievement in this world. أَلَا مِپَنَيْ شَأَنُ بَعْلَيْ گُفُ خُيَا, we, being physical beings in a physical world where such things are required, so these things are therefore considered to be of importance, and as far as that goes, they are important. But that's a purely subjective and temporary assessment of the facts. All these things that we mentioned, the eating and the drinking and the wearing of fine clothes and sexual relations without end, etc. These are all tzorchei haguf. These are all things that the body, the physical body of the human being drives him to. وَإِنْ هَالنَّفَشْ مِثْعَوَى لَهِمْ وَمُحَمَّدْ and the true essence of a human being does not desire them, but because of the physical aspect of a human being's existence requires it and demands it, which of course is also good, because without that the person would not exist. So it's supposed to be so, but it is something which on the one hand you can say, as the ancient philosophers said, that which is unavoidable, inevitable, cannot be and should not be viewed, not be looked at askance, and viewed as something beneath our dignity or something like that. That is not true. But to think it is the be-all and end-all, that is also clearly not the case. And the reason that we need these things and wish for these things in this world is in other words, so that a person can exist and be healthy and not be disturbed by these various needs, and not distracted therefore from more important things. And when there is no such physical existence, all such things cease to exist. So in Rambam's version of Olam Haba, there is no physical existence. So none of these things exist. According to other Shittot, there is a physical existence, but it's of a completely different type, a different category of existence altogether, a different dimension, and therefore these things do not exist. Not because there's no physical existence, but because it's a very different form and reality of existence. And if a person wishes to know more about Olam Haba, says Rambam now, in Halacha Yud Aleph, הטובה הגדולה שתהיה בה הנפש בעולם הבא, this state of existence, בעולם הבא, הטובה, this great benefit and good, אין שם דרך בעולם הזה, there is no way. In Hebrew we wouldn't require the word sham, rather, it's an intrusion into the Hebrew from the Arabic idiom. There, as we say in English, there is no way of knowing. אין דרך בעולם הזה להשיגה בה ולדע אותה. It cannot really be understood or perceived in this world. שאין אנו יודעים בעולם הזה אלא טובת הגוף. What we experience in this world are things which we do experience, things which are not of a physical nature or origin, but that's true for more spiritually inclined people. Most people are very much focused on their physical existence. That's the norm. That is how most people view things. And that is what we focus on and desire and aspire to. That indescribable and unknowable reality, בעולם הבא, is very great. And it cannot be compared at all or understood in terms of anything that we experience in this life. The truth is, שנערוך טובות הנפש בעולם הבא כמו טובת הגוף בעולם הזה במאכל ובמשקה. The idea, the conception that we should in any way think like the Aravim, Hatipshim mentioned earlier, that this is what Olam Haba consists of. Ela othah tova, that is ridiculous. Enoken. Ela othah tova gedola aden heker. It is beyond conception وَإِنْ عِرَخ وَإِنْ دِمْيَون, and it cannot be in any way understood in terms of this world. הוא שאמר דוד, מה רב טובך אשר צפנת לרעך, פעלת לחוסים בך. And this pasuk, Gam Lefi Peshuto, seems clearly to suggest these ideas. That how great and how beyond conception is the tov, the good that you have set aside for those who fear you. Lireacha, Pa'alta lachosim bach, for those who trust in you. V'chama Hama David, V'hith Awa L'Haya Olam Haba. And in the Pesukim in Tehillim, we see a great yearning for this existence of this sort, Olam Haba. Lule he'amanti lirot tuva Adonai be'eretz hayim. So this is an example of what Rambam said earlier. Eretz hayim refers to Olam Haba, as Rambam understands this pasuk. And Tuv Hashem refers to Olam Haba, according to this understanding of the pasuk. It's true, the pasuk can be understood differently. Eretz Hayim can be understood to be referring to Eretz Yisrael, and Tuv Hashem means to exist in a state of peace and well-being, and thus to be free of all manner of distractions and problems, such as physical needs that are not being answered, or dealing with enemies and warfare and what have you. These things are all classical aspects of lack of shleimut in this world, as Rambam explains here in Hilchot Melachim u'Milchamot, that Yemot HaMashiach is a time when in this world, we are in this world, but we are able to focus on the aim and the eventual progression and evolution of events will be such that in this world, the Jewish people will be able to become closer and closer to Hashem without any distractions. Rambam continues. Kvar hodi'unu, this is now Chayil Beth. Hodi'unu hachamim horishonim. The Chachamim mentioned explicitly shetovat ha'olam haba en koach ba'adam lahasira al buriya. It cannot be perceived and conceived of by a human being in this world. Wa'en yudhi'a godla v'yofya wa'othmah ela hakadosh baruch hu levado. Only Hashem can know what this Olam Haba refers to, and its true nature. All the various positive things that the Nevi'im refer to, that which Am Yisrael will enjoy in the time of the Melech HaMashiach, בזמן שתחזור הממשלה לישראל, when the Jewish people regain political and real-world freedom and sovereignty and liberty, and will not be at the mercy of evildoers and their enemies, etc. That is what Yemot HaMashiach is all about, as Rambam is about to tell us further. He goes on to say, Aval tovat hayeh ha'olam haba. So what the Nevi'im spoke about was Olam Hazeh at its highest possible level, the best possible version of Olam Haba, of Olam Hazeh, of this world. That is what the Nevi'im referred to. The Nevi'im did not and could not describe Olam Haba. Aval tovat hayeh Olam haba en la erech v'dimyon. V'lo dimu ha'nevi'im. The Nevi'im did not even try to describe it. כדי שלא יפחתו אותה בדמיון, so as not to, as it were, underrate it. הוא שישעיהו אומר, עין לא ראתה אלוהים זולתך יעשה למחכה לו. This pasuk can be understood at least as follows: Kolomar, literally, no eye has seen Hashem what you have in store for those who wait for you. Kolomar, hatova shelo ra'atha ota ein navi, that great reality, that future and unknowable reality, not described by any navi. Ela asa ota Elohim la'adam shemehake lo. This is kept in store and awaits those who truly seek Hashem. Amaru Hachamim, and the Hachamim therefore said, Kol, and these are of course explicit statements of Chazal, Kol HaNevi'im Kulam Lo Nitnabba'u Ela Limot HaMashiach. All the various statements and expressions and mashalim that you find in the Nevi'im, according to this opinion in Chazal, that Rambam quotes here and elsewhere and follows without fail, they all refer to Yimot HaMashiach. In other words, this world. Yimot HaMashiach is clearly something which exists within this world as we know it, but on the most agreeable, the most pleasant, the most perfect form of existence, B'olam Hazeh. But that which pertains to Olam Haba, Ayin lo ra'atha Elohim zulatecha, or zulatecha. In other words, this cannot be. This is not described by the Nevi'im, and it's beyond what the Nevi'im could possibly know. And here, at the end of this perek, Rambam must address the question that we mentioned earlier, which is Olam Haba. According to Rambam's explanation and description and conception of things, exists at the present time as well. It's not a future reality which has not yet come into being, into existence. So Rambam says, Zeh shekarevu Chachamim ha'olam haba lo mipnei she'eino mathui ata, not because it does not exist at this point in time. V'zeh ha'olam oved v'achar kach yavo otho ha'olam. Here Rambam expresses exactly the opposite opinion to his own opinion. In other words, others would say it means what it says. Olam haba is a future dimension of reality. It does not exist at this point. Zeh ha'olam oved, at some point this world will come to an end. V'achar kach yavo otho olam, and then there will be this other reality called olam haba. Rambam says no. Everything Rambam has said till now clearly implies that it exists at this point in time as well. Ein hadavar ken, that is not so. Ela harei hu mathui v'omed, it exists. Olam haba exists now. Shene'emar ma rab tuvcha shel tzafanta lireacha. We just quoted that pasuk before. How great is this tova that you have set aside and reserved and promised for those who fear you. It is called Olam Haba, the world to come, because it follows the world here that we know here. It exists for that person after he leaves this world. This world in which we live in, with both the guf, the physical body, and the nefesh, and the spiritual essence of a person, as it is for all people in their original existence. In other words, in this world, all people first experience this world. That's Olam Hazeh, and later they experience Olam Haba. That is how Rambam presents the matter. As I mentioned several times, this is Rambam's opinion or view and understanding of these matters. It is not the opinion, actually, of most of the Chachamim that whose views we can discuss perhaps at another time. For today, we shall end here. היו ברוכים, חזקו וירס לבבכן כל המייחלים לאדוני. Shalom וניצחון על כל אויבינו. Bezrat Hashem, even though the road is long and difficult, but Bezrat Hashem we shall see both Shalom and Nitzachon. Sometimes people point out to me that Lichora I should say Nitzachon v'Shalom, which is also true, but Shalom v'Nitzachon sounds better. So Shalom v'Nitzachon al kol oivenu mibayit u'michutz. Shalom, Shalom.